Hello, I'm Brian Powers. I'm here at Franklin Community High School, and we're shooting this video to share with you how we do our safety precautions here at Franklin Community High School and why we do them as well. We wanted to share this information to better inform you and answer some questions or any questions you might have on this. We have with us today several members of the administrative staff. We have Mr. Scott Martin, Assistant Principal, Doug Cox, School Resource Officer, Brandon Tungate, one of the deans here, and Mr. Steve Ahaus, who is our school principal. So just start off here with Mr. Martin. We have the standard response protocol posters in all of the classrooms and throughout the building. So if you could just kind of talk about what we have on those and what the procedure for those is. Okay,
I'd like to start with making parents aware that one of the most important things, whether it be a drill or an emergency situation that actually arises, when we go into these protocols, students will not be able to be picked up. So it's not the first thing that you hear something might be going on at the school to respond right to the school. We will put communication out as soon as we can, what the protocols might be. If there is going to be a drill during the day, we do, whether it be a hold, lockdown, we do keep kids in classes and they cannot be released. So that's an important thing to know. Another thing is that I will remind parents that if you are going to pick up your kid, call early enough so that if we are doing a drill, you can get your student out before the drill.
So and that's calling ahead if they have like a doctor's visit or dentist or anything like
exactly
that.
Right.
Yeah. So in looking at this list and looking at the poster, the first tab we have here is hold. Let's say, for instance, we have a seizure in the hallway and we would put hold into place. Describe what that would be like.
We would call hold over the PA. Students would be then asked to go to their class, into their classroom, stay in the class. The teacher would continue teaching. If there's a passing period, it would still be hold, which means stay in that class. The teacher would just resume their normal things. It's not a situation that does anything except for keep everybody out of the hallways so that if there are emergency personnel or the nurse, they can respond to that student as quickly as possible.
Okay. And then the next one we have secure. Now we have experienced that this year. There was a situation kind of in the neighborhood near us. So describe what that situation is going to be like.
Secure tells the staff and students that there's something going on in the neighborhood outside the building. The main thing is to lock doors, be ready to go into another emergency stance if needed, but at that point in time, lights are on, teachers are teaching, but everybody stays in that location, but we've locked the doors, especially the exterior doors, so no one can come in. And that's something important for parents to know is if we're insecure, no one can enter the building at that point in time. The nice thing about the situation with the standoff with the police notified us that we needed to do that. We went to that secure mode. We were in communication because our SRO was able to be in communication of what was going on. It did take a while for us to go out of that mode. It was probably, I think, a 50-minute secure situation, but we were able to get lunches done afterwards and go back to normal.
Yeah. So. And in that situation, nobody is allowed to come in and nobody is allowed to go out, correct?
That's correct, because we don't want students leaving the building and going into a situation where they might get in danger.
Okay. And then the next one is lockdown. Kind of talk us through that situation, what that would be.
Lockdown is probably one of the most severe drills or things that we need to do. That means that kids are taken to areas out of sight, locked behind closed doors, lights off, secure them so that they can make the right decision at that point, students and staff. We try to empower students by talking to them. So when we run drills, we have teachers and students actually converse about what if this situation arises, what would you do? But in a lockdown, we totally freeze everything. No one can go anywhere at any point in time. And at that point in time, if we were in a real lockdown, the police would be responding and the area driveways, they would be blocked off so no one would be able to gain entrance at that time.
Okay, and they can't even come onto the grounds.
That is correct.
No. Okay, and then the last one is evacuate, or the next one is evacuate. Why don't you talk to us about that?
An example of something that might come up to make us evacuate the building might be severe weather. The building gets damaged and we're no longer to keep kids safe in the building. We have multiple areas for the high school because we have 1,600 students in the building. So some of the areas we might relocate to might be the football field. It might be the middle school. It might be an elementary. We've even talked about the armory if needed, just depending on what type of situation we're evacuating from. The biggest thing on that is we would not be able to release kids. We'd take all students on buses to another location. And the reunification process, one of the things we want parents to know is it can be time consuming, because just like when you come to the school and pick up your student, we will require ID, so it's important to bring your ID if that ever occurred, and we would have to match kids with their parents and or their guardians.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then shelter is the last one on this list. Just briefly touch on that.
Shelter is our code for severe weather. If there is and we did have a 45-minute one, I think 2 years ago, where there was severe weather in the area, we would go to the lowest area that's safe, where it protects us from any wind damage, or in certain hallways, restrooms that are approved by the fire department, fire code, to be secure areas, usually in lower levels, and so that's what shelter would be.
So for shelter, that's pretty much a standalone. Like it's usually not going to go all the way through. Would that be accurate?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And then the important thing I think for parents and students to remember in this is that these are all fluid. I mean, you're in one, you can quickly go to another, or you could go back. It's kind of important to remember that.
That is correct.
Yeah. And then you talked about the reunification process. Obviously, when you're in a situation where you have to evacuate, or even with the lockdown, the final goal, especially in the evacuation, is to get students home, get them home safely. You said it's a long process. Take us kind of through what we need to know about that process.
If we actually evacuated to another building, teachers would have their group of students, so depending upon what period it was out of, a teacher might have their third period students. So they would know who was present that day. Those students would remain with that teacher to another location. Once we're in that other location, there's a process where we actually have to sign out kids to each individual parent. And when you're talking 1,600 kids, that can be a long time consuming process. So patience would be the biggest thing if anything ever caused us to evacuate from this building. Thank
you, Mr. Martin. We're going to pivot now to Mr. Brandon Tungate, one of the deans here at FCHS. In order to find out about something, obviously someone has to report it. So just talk about the duty to report that we have around here.
Yeah, so basically everyone's obligated by Indiana law and by our board policies to report certain things. Some of those can be sexual abuse, child abuse, neglect, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, ideation. So by law, those things have to be reported. So our teachers go through an annual training every year to kind of review those procedures, because sometimes does this need to be reported? Is it, should I report that? Should I not report it? Kind of a main takeaway from our training is if you have a reason to believe that, there's abuse or neglect, things, you should report it. And this all applies to everyone, not just teachers, but all staff members, students. Everybody has a duty to report things. It's actually in Indiana a Class B misdemeanor if you don't report something, if you knowingly know that stuff and you don't report it.
Yeah, so it's just important to remember, like if you think that something's going on, then someone needs to know about it.
Correct.
Let's just make sure. Now, in a situation that someone's trying to report it, how would they go about doing that?
Well, obviously, we have students come down and just report things in person to us, or sometimes students will email us things and we try to follow up with them. We understand that's not always, students don't feel comfortable just coming down, or they may want to do it anonymously. So a great resource we've used in the last few years is our Stop It app. And what that is, it doesn't have to be anonymous. They can give us as much information as they want about who's reporting it, but they can give us, I know this is going on with this student, or I heard this is happening. And again, that can be anonymous, but a lot of times we can follow up through that app. There's a messaging system that we can chat with that person to get more information. Sometimes we may ask, hey, would you be willing to, we may need to call you down and talk about it more in person. So there's kind of two sides of that when we follow up on things. There's obviously an in-school where we talk to the student. We may have to ask teachers information, counselors may be involved, administrators, often law enforcement, depending on what the situation is. And then outside of school, law enforcement may follow up with certain things. But basically, the biggest thing we try to tell, if you see something, say something. If you know something's going on that you feel like you should report, just do it however you feel comfortable. Like I said, whether that's in person, whether you email us, the Stop It app, we just want students to feel like they can report things, and they should report things. But we do understand that we want to protect relationships and things like that when students report things, that if need be, we can protect that and not say, well, you just came down and this person came and told us this about you, that you're doing this. We try to protect their privacy, but again, we have an obligation to look into those things.
Yeah, and it's important to remember too, don't assume that someone else has reported this either. Don't
Correct.
assume, hey, they've already told, I assume they've already told. It doesn't hurt to make sure that it's been reported.
Right, and we get that often, and I thought this person reported that, but it's better 20 people report something than nobody. That's the way we look at things.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brandon.
Yep.
So moving here to Mr. Ahaus, our principal. Obviously, we have people coming in the building in different roles throughout the week, whether that's a speaker, substitute teacher, coach, lay coach from outside of the building, anything like that. What is the process to vet those people who are coming into the building itself?
Well, from a sub or someone who's going to be in that position, there's an HR background check and things that are done that way. From just purely a visitor or working with our kids standpoint, it really goes in two different directions. We have people who might be coming in on like a single day to present a program or speak to our class, or what I would say is maybe work with kids more indirectly, where we've got the teacher, we've got people there. So they'd come in, bring their ID, get a limited background check just right there with us. We'd give them a visitor pass. Those are usually things that we've arranged ahead of time, so we've done our background on who they are, why they're coming here, what the plan is, all those kinds of things. Then we have more where this is probably what impacts more parents, is they want to be involved in a program. So they want to help the choir program, or they want to help the band program, or they want to be a part of helping the football team or the ag program. And so they're more, what I would say, more directly working with kids. They're in positions where they could be supervising, they could be directing kids, and they have to go through our safe visitor system. And so until they run through that, they're really not allowed to work with our kids and come in. And so there's really 3 levels of participation we give parents, or 4 if you want to consider totally not being allowed, being denied, if you want to say dened's one, which if something came back on a background check that we felt is severe enough that we would not allow access at all, which has happened, not very often, but then there's full participation, which is what I would say most of our parents get because things are pretty clean. And then in the middle, we can either do partial or even just like a very restricted participation, and that would just, so sometimes we have people who have things in their background that happened 15 years ago, and it's been clean since, and we have people that might have minor violations and things, and if they're not threatening to kids, if they're things that have passed in time, we kind of make the judgment call on do we restrict some kind of participation there? So they can be approved even if something has happened in the past, but we do look at each one of those. It comes through a system, it gets flagged, and we have to look at it like what happened, when did it happen, what's happened since, all of those kind of things. So that's probably the one that impacts parents the most, is because they want to be involved in what their kids are doing, and we still need to run background checks and then make judgment calls on kind of what might be in their background that would keep them from being able to do that safely, keep our kids safe. So
Right. Now, we don't necessarily always have people coming into the building besides in a substitute role, but every single day, multiple times a day, we have people coming into the main office, or at least up to the window for the main office, to pick someone up, to drop someone off, to drop something off, just someone coming in. This happens multiple times a day. So what do they do in those situations?
There's some things that they have to do, and some things that just make the process more smooth. Mm-hmm. So the first thing would be, and this would be just for every parent, is keeping Power School updated with their emergency information, contacts, emails, family members. Is this student living at this address? You'd be surprised how much of our information does not get updated by parents, and that slows down a process big time. So that would just be one. But when they come in, we're fortunate enough that we've been able to set up our office here over the last few years to where parents come in and they don't enter directly into the office. which is a big safety measure for us. So parents will notice that they come to a window, and we are going to ask them to stay out there until, if they're here to see someone, until that person, whether it be me or an assistant principal or dean or a counselor, or whoever it might be, comes to greet them and see them into the building, knowing that we've set up an appointment or that we know who's coming in the building. But outside of that, if they're going to pick up their kid, we ask that they call, Mr. Martin hit on some of this, they call an hour in advance or call in advance to get their student. They have to have their ID with them, which we get some people that get pretty frustrated by that, but that is part of the process, and for obvious reasons, we want to know who's picking someone up. So we'll have parents sometimes who will call and say, well, I need my kid at 1 o'clock, and then at 1 o'clock, cousin Joe shows up to pick them up, and they're not in our system, we don't know their name, that's not who called, and so, and on the family side, it's like, well, they're a family member, they're just here to get, their cousin. And it's like, well, you didn't tell us that. They're not in our system. We don't. And so we do have an obligation to try to monitor where they go, who they go with. And so those kind of things either cause frustration or slow things down when either information's not updated or we don't have all the information or they show up at the moment. And a lot of times what happens is they'll text their son or daughter or, whoever it might be, so they know, but we don't know in the office, so then that slows down things. It's not easy. We do have, as we've said here, 1,600 plus kids, and where they might be with a teacher or taking a test or doing something, whatever it might be, if we don't know and teacher can't prepare and the student can't prepare, then it just slows things down. So I would say those are probably just being patient with the process and making sure that as a family, if you keep us updated, whether it's information or your plans, that helps us better serve you and doesn't cause that situation where we're at the window like, I want this now, and we're not able to do that because we can't throw our policies and practices out the window just because somebody needs to move quickly or there's a miscommunication. So I think that's probably the biggest thing on that.
We need just as much information as you can give for when you're coming, why you're coming, who's coming, who your student is, all that, and then we just need the patience for that.
Yeah.
No. All right. Thank you, Mr. Ahaus.
Yep.
We have next up Officer Cox, Doug Cox, our school resource officer. Doug, you've seen a lot of things throughout all your time in law enforcement as well, but now this is probably kind of a different role for you. How do you see things, though, that happen in the school? Like, what have you seen that's happened in the school that have rolled outside of the school? Because a lot of times people think, oh, this is happening in school, I might just get suspended or something like that. And that's sometimes not the case. So what are some of those situations that you've seen happen?
Thanks, Brian. I think probably the most important thing for parents and students to know is that, number one, I'm here to protect them, to keep them from harm, and that goes for the students and staff here at Franklin High School. To go along with that, I work closely with the Dean of Students. They have their jobs to do. I have my job, and my job deals a lot of times with violations of criminal code and traffic code here in the state of Indiana. A few things that I've seen at the start of this school year that concerns me. One is battery. Some batteries that have been occurring between students. I think it's important that parents and students realize that battery, the definition of battery in the state of Indiana, is touching someone in a rude, insolent, or angry manner. That is a Class B misdemeanor. When injuries occur, those penalties get more stiffer. Battery can become an A misdemeanor, and in some cases with serious injuries, these batteries can become felonies. So I think it's important for parents and students to know that going to the point of battering somebody in school is not the way to properly handle these situations. The best way to handle these situations is letting people know of your problems before it gets to the point where you feel like you have to commit battery. Battery, as an 18-year-old, you go to jail for committing battery. If you're a juvenile, then in some cases you would go to the juvenile detention center. Another concerning situation here at the school from what we've seen from the start of the school year is the number of students that have been caught with vaping devices. Those vaping devices can fall into two categories. One is the different fruit flavors, which is a simple infraction if the student is caught with the device here at school. The students that are caught with the THC devices, which is the marijuana devices, that is actually a misdemeanor that can once again result in an 18-year-old going to jail, or someone under 18 years old of going to the juvenile detention center. The fine on those vaping devices, the flavored devices, is $145. That's a pretty stiff penalty for having one of those devices in their possession. And the one thing we're trying to get across to them is those devices should not be in school, period, whether it's a THC device or whether it's just a regular fruit-flavored vaping device. Unfortunately, it occupies a lot of my time here at the school, time that could be quite honestly devoted to other areas. But those are the two main things that we are seeing here at the high school at the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, and one could even say that those not only do they not belong on school with those students, they shouldn't even have them, because it's illegal for them to have them anywhere.
Indiana law changed recently to where they even increased the age from 18 to 21 years old to even be able to go into a store and purchase those devices, so you're absolutely correct.
Now, you also have a ton of other roles around here. Just obviously keeping our students safe is your main priority. And part of that is with the traffic and the traffic flow in and out in the morning and in the afternoon. What are some of the things that parents and students can do that can better help you with the traffic flow and when they're coming and going?
I think the most important thing is that when the turn signal is necessary, that not only the parents, the students also utilize their turn signals. It will help me get them into the school in a timely and safe fashion, and it will also allow me to get them home in a safe fashion. It will also keep me safe out in the middle of the intersection, also by that being used properly. It really does help me do my job. So if there's anything, I would say that. The other thing that I would remind everybody is that there is a speed limit on school property, and that speed limit is 20 miles an hour.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. And then as far as the firearms, what are the school policies as far as that goes?
Indiana law recently changed when it comes to concealed carry. So I think it's important for everybody to realize that firearms are not permissible on school property. And when I say school property, I would be talking about the school building itself, I would be talking about an athletic event, and I would be talking about a school bus. No one, except for a law enforcement officer, may be on school property with a firearm currently under Indiana law. One area that they are allowed is when a parent is on school property and they have that firearm secured properly. And what I mean by secured properly, if a parent had a firearm in a trunk or in a glove box and it was secured properly, that is not against Indiana law. But I would tell you that if it is laying in the seat of the vehicle and the vehicle's unlocked, then they just committed a misdemeanor offense. Coming into school with a firearm, coming into a school bus with a firearm, or coming to a school event such as a football, basketball, baseball game, that is a felony, a level 6 felony that will result in their arrest if they come on school property with a firearm.
Yeah, it's important to remember that, especially with all of the rules that have changed recently.
Absolutely.
So, or the laws and everything. All right. Mr. Ahaus, kind of just talk to us here about the situations that we see at school, the current situations that we've seen as we're about a quarter of the way through the school year. What are some of the things that we've seen that have taken up the majority of the time?
Well, I won't echo all of what Officer Cox said, but I mean, he's right on with what he sees. I would just elaborate that on a little bit, and first I would add threatening statements, whether that's about a student verbally, whether that's on social media. That takes a lot of time. We have to take those seriously. So when those are reported, it takes time to really vet that out and see. And we do try to figure out whether we feel like that's a real threat, whether, what is the circumstances around that. But any kind of threatening statement has to be taken seriously. And if we feel like, it's hard to go into where that falls in terms of like a disciplinary measure. I will say if somebody does and says something threatening like that, hits our discipline system somewhere, whether that's counseling or a detention or a suspension or an expulsion, like it's going to fall in that system somewhere. But it also creates, why are you saying that? You know, is it a joke? Is it a real threat? What kind of disturbance does that cause? You know, there are certain kinds of threats that can cause us to shut down school. There are threats that can cause very little disturbance, but yet it's still a threat that could be real to somebody. So it's really hard to go into elaborate on that, but it happens more than it needs to happen, and we really need parents to help their students understand that you cannot make threatening statements about the school or about coming to school or about a student, and that if you do and we get that information, we're going to act on it, and we're going to have to act on it. And so I would say that, I would add that to the different topics that Officer Cox shared. And then just to elaborate on the two that he had, the fighting part, we've seen a little more of that than we normally see here. We don't typically deal with a lot of fights, and we've seen a number of them to start this school year. I do believe part of that is a societal thing, where we're seeing a lot of people who feel like if I disagree that needs to come out in an angry statement or a threatening statement or a disrespectful statement, and we're dealing with a lot of that. We've seen it a lot in our freshman class and sophomore classes, where I feel like at this point there may be, as he used this statement, not capable of handling conflict in an appropriate way, where we feel like the way to handle that is I'm just going to go hit somebody, or I'm going to go threaten them, or I'm going to go get in their face. And we've seen a bit of a decline here, you know, over the last few weeks, I think, from what we saw to start the year. But and I think part of that may be some of the severity of what we're doing with students that take those actions. And so, again, another statement from parents at home, like, it is not okay to come to school and hit somebody under any circumstance. No social media tweet or post, or no, I heard from so-and-so that so-and-so said this, justifies going up and hitting someone. And so that's our approach. Unfortunately, we do get statements from parents at times that say, well, I tell them to defend themselves and I tell them to do this, and that's not the words that we want. And so, you know, that's not going to work here. So, you know, we just need parents to let them understand there are ways to handle that. There are people to report stuff to. There's ways to handle it that are not, well, why don't you just go hit them? And so, you know, I think we'll make progress on that, but we have seen a bit more of that this year than what we normally do. And then also the vaping. Vaping is probably number one on the list of issues that we have. The number of kids that group in areas such as the restroom and such as areas like that. I will say that we are in the process of getting vape detectors that we would place throughout the building and in restrooms and places that are hard for us to monitor to help us do that. But it's also, I would just say with that, like, our goal is not to go around and just try to catch every kid. Like, we just want it out of our building. And so we don't take joy in writing them tickets and giving them detentions and them getting in trouble. That's not what we're looking for. It just shouldn't be here, and it doesn't need to be. And other kids that don't want that in the building, you know, don't want to have to, you know, be in places where kids are doing those things. And I don't know that our kids really understand how damaging it is to their body and how unhealthy it is, and we want them not doing it. And so, but at the same time, I will say at times, I would say we maybe get the feeling from parents that it's not a big deal. Oh, well, my kid's vaping, or like, oh, that's mine. He must have just taken it, or she must have just taken it. And there's not really this approach of like, wow, they should not be doing that. It's like, oh, shoot, they got caught at school. Like, and so I think that approach from parents too is just like, this is not healthy for them. It's very addicting, and that's probably why we see it in school as much as anything, is they can't get away from it. So they bring it to school because they can't spend the whole school day getting away from it. And so, you know, those are other issues that we, you know, work with. But vaping's a big one right now, and it's not quite as damaging to another kid as hitting them or those kind of things, but it's very damaging to that kid, and it doesn't need to be in this building, and it's probably one of our bigger issues. So I would say those three, the threatening statements, the fighting, and the vaping. So I would just add one to what he had said about just things that we're seeing and things that we deal with, you know, almost on a, I don't want to say on a daily basis, but just week to week we're dealing with some of those issues, you know, and trying to help kids. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's just go around kind of some final thoughts from each of you. We'll start with Mr. Ahaus.
Okay. I guess just on the thoughts that I shared, the biggest thing is just parents, that collaboration of like, all of us are here, and we don't take pride in getting kids in trouble or having to deal with discipline. I mean, we really are trying to keep them safe. And as much as parents and students can be a part of that collaboration, I think, and understanding that, because most of the issues that are brought in here are outside issues that are brought into the school. A lot of the arguments and fights aren't things that have anything to do with school. It's something that's happened outside of school and brought in. Same thing with vaping. The social media stuff typically happens outside of our school building, and then we end up dealing with it here. So we know that that's our job, but man, when parents can be helpful, supportive, talking about that stuff at home, I mean, and it's a partnership as opposed to like, what do you mean you're getting our kid in trouble for that? Like, I mean, we're just trying to do school. and that stuff's brought into the school, and now we're trying to deal with it while we're trying to do school. And, we would love it if we didn't have that, but when it happens, we have to deal with it, and we have to do certain things. Certain things can't happen in this building, and we're not going to allow it when it's brought to our attention. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just that parent partnership of like, we're with you in trying to make sure that this doesn't happen, or that this is seen as not acceptable, or those kind of things. So that would probably be my biggest thing.
All right, thank you. Brandon Tungate, next, just some final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I mean, just to go back on, students reporting things, and kind of just what Mr. Ahouse said, our main job is to keep students safe in our school. And students are kind of the first line of defense. Like, they know a lot of things and hear a lot of things, and until we get that information to get the ball rolling, like, we can't look into things. So if they can, in a timely manner, like as soon as kids know things, try to report it. That just helps the situation keep people safer quicker and help us sort through things. Not that if a week's gone by and a student knows something, they shouldn't tell us, but that just muddies the waters a little bit, makes it harder to kind of sort through things. And the more something's happened and then this person knows and this person knows and it's got out there, it's hard to get back to what's really going on sometimes. So we want students to feel like they can come and talk to us, report things. I mean, that's what we're here to help students and be safe at school. So whether it's in person, they email us, they use the Stop It app, just please tell somebody if you know something's going on. And I know that's hard with kids about snitching, and I don't want to go tell somebody, but we all have a responsibility to keep everybody safe in the building, whether it's teachers, students, staff, everyone. So just if you know something, if you feel like there's some weight on your chest, like you know something, you feel like you should tell somebody, just please tell somebody so we can take care of it.
Okay. Officer Cox, final thoughts.
I would like everybody to remember that I am here almost every day, all day, that my door is always open. So if you're a student or you yourself have questions, I've been a police officer in this community for 41 years. If I don't have the answer, I'll find it for them. So if your student is struggling at home over an issue or at school, that my door is always open.
Thank you. And last, Mr. Martin.
Last, thank you.
Finally.
Yes.
Finally, Mr. Martin.
No, that's fine. This safety forum is to inform parents, and communication is key in everything. And one of the things I want parents to hear is when we are given information, I can guarantee that our deans, assistant principals, we investigate the matter to our fullest, and we do take every situation seriously, and we do address them. I would say you may not agree with the way we address it, but whether it be to try to educate the student that is the perpetrator, whether it is to counsel them, whether it is to actually discipline them, we do take steps. And when we get parents and students that say we did nothing, it kind of digs at me, because I know we've done something. It may not be something that you agree with, but hopefully you'll be open and communicate enough to say it's still going on so we can address it the next time and the next time. And then eventually our goal is to get it stopped, and or if we have to remove a student from school. We hope it doesn't come to that, but we do have steps we have to take on both sides. So please communicate with us and keep open communication throughout.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just in my situation as a counselor, I can say my door is always open, as well as are the other counselors. So if you ever need someone to talk to or someone else to go to, just know that you can always come down to us as well. We hope that this safety forum was informative for you and it answered some questions that you might have, gave you a little peek inside to see how we run things, what we're seeing, and what we're doing to help stop some of the situations. This is all very important information, and it's very key to help keeping your students safe, which is our #1 priority. So for Mr. Steve Ahaus, Brandon Tungate, Doug Cox, and Scott Martin, I'm Brian Powers. Thank you for joining us.